Every now and then, a modder will publish a new dungeon adventure mod. I've explored a few of these in the past. Today, we're going to explore a new one. This one is called the Coolidge Institute by Mitchformer. Deep within the heart of the Commonwealth lies a secret complex that was formed by Dr. Harlow Nettle, one of Vault-Tech's main authorities on survival preparation, who also happens to be a distant cousin of Calvin Coolidge. Originally designed as an education center for the overseers before the Great War decimated the Commonwealth, the Calvin Coolidge Institute is now a husk of its former self. The souls unlucky enough to still be inside when the bombs dropped began losing their sanity. They distracted themselves with morbid endeavors and odd interests that eventually resulted in everyone buying the farm. Raiders now roam the underground establishment and have taken an affinity to some of the practices the would-be overseers engaged in. It seems as though the Coolidge Institute would have remained a warren for reprobates for all of eternity. That is, until the sole survivor arrived. We find the entrance to the Calvin Coolidge Institute midway between Big John Salvage and Relay Tower 0SC527. We see a tiny little bunker. On the outside, there are 2 lit lanterns held aloft by plungers, and on top of the bunker is a strange sight. We see a skeleton that looks like it has hanged itself, except it has giddy-up buttercup legs and a pumpkin head. Above this is another strange arrangement, a skeleton with bowling balls for hands and Bosco's mascot head. Not sure how this bear mascot head came here all the way from South Boston, but when we're ready, we can enter the bunker. We arrive in a long hallway lined with lockers. We immediately see a skeleton in pieces lying before a mailbox. This skeleton is wearing a dirty postman hat. He was likely delivering mail to this post box, which was strangely indoors, the day the bombs dropped. This hallway is lined with a number of doors. Opening the first one to the left brings us to a store of some sort. We see 2 desks, one of which has a cash register on it. Maybe this was where Vault-Tech overseers in training could purchase things like Vault-Tech lab coats and other gear for their vaults. There's a skeleton sitting before a desk with a typewriter. The empty bottle of wine tells us that this poor fellow got himself drunk after the apocalypse. The skeleton sitting behind the cash register is in pieces, though he does have a stogie still clutched in his hand. That looks good, I think I'll take that. Upon opening the door behind him, we realize that we're not alone. Uh-oh, I'm gonna have to be more quiet. This back room was a computer room of sorts. We find a number of containers, and then to the east, we find a raider corpse clutching a pulse mine. At his feet is a locker, and then a safe, but this safe requires a key. We can't pick this sucker. Looks like we'll have to keep our eyes open. Heading back to the hallway, we can explore some of these lockers. They're filled with randomized loot, and since this was a Vault-Tech Overseer training school, we see a lot of these pins lining the walls. Opening the door to the southeast brings us to an office. Maybe that of the headmaster of this school, or at least a secretary. There's a big cozy chair tipped over in front of this person's desk, with more bones littering the ground. The skeleton behind the desk is headless, and oh, look at that! We see railway spikes embedded in the wall behind. This is our first indication that something twisted and rather violent must have happened here after the bombs dropped. Inside the desk, we inexplicably find a bottle of Deezer's lemonade. Not sure how a post-war can of lemonade made it into this pre-war desk, though I suppose it's possible one of the raiders could have put it here. And we even see one of Pikmin's artistic endeavors on the wall, which I can't explain at all. Creeping out and peering around a corner to the southeast, we see that the hallway goes east and then up some stairs. We'll save the stairs for later. Instead, we can turn around and open the western door next to a Vault Boy speech pin. This door is locked with a novice lock. Inside, we find a bit of a classroom. Each of these desks is decorated with the personality of the student who once sat here. The first desk we see has a line of chalk stretching to the teacher's desk, but before we can explore it, we get attacked by a mole rat. On the desk, we find a 10mm pistol and a bunch of 10mm rounds. Moving on to the teacher's desk, we don't find much, just a bunch of empty beer. This teacher was a bit of a boozer. We find one desk to the north with some blocks on top. Creeping around behind them, we see that the blocks spell love. And there's a lover's locket lying just before them. Behind this, we find a desk decorated with some chems and some 6 balls, 3 6 balls. To be specific, spelling 666. The one next to this is covered in food. We find an overdue book here. And the one behind this has a skull wearing a fedora, a bottle of whiskey, and a still lit cigar. Behind this, we find tools and a model robot on a desk. And in a cat bowl on the ground, we find a Tato injected with Med-X. There's a desk with rare baseball paraphernalia, including the signed catcher's mitt and the baseball card from Mo Cronin's quest, sending us to the Westing estate. So if we install this mod, we're gonna get duplicates of these rare quest items. We find a skull on a rocket, a footlocker with more baseball grenades, and a skeleton on the ground. Spread eagle. Between its legs sits a teddy bear wearing a miniature derby hat, and the blocks before him spell vault. Heading back to the hallway, we can either go east towards those stairs or open these big double doors. Let's go through the big double doors first. Here we see a hole in the wall. Oh, and movement. This looks like a little bit of a raider workshop. On a table, we find a skeleton pinned to the surface with railway spikes, and his head has been chopped off with a machete. We find the skull lying on the ground below. There's a weapons workbench in here, and we find a perfectly preserved pie in a red toolbox. So there you go, install the mod and you don't need high luck. On the table next to this are more baseballs and a baseball hand grenade. Looks like this raider was making more when we killed him. Heading out and continuing down the hallway, we can open the first door to the right, but it's locked with a novice lock. Inside we find another classroom. Oh! Ah, come on. There is a dead raider here. I wonder if he was a victim to another mole rat. And these desks are decorated as well. We find a skeleton with his head on a pillow, another one holding a tape recorder. There's some Calmex injected in a tiny pumpkin in the dog bowl. There's a pirate wearing Hancock's signature tricorn hat. The back desk is food themed. We see a skull wearing a chef's hat in a saucepan next to some pink paste. And on the ground in the western corner, we find a skeleton on a bed. At the head of the bed, we see MacCready's wooden toy soldier, the one he made as a child. How did this get in here? And the blocks spell dunce. The bookshelf behind is covered in mole rat teeth. We do find one berry mentats and a bunch of mole rat hide. When done, we can head out and continue south down the hallway. We can go into the room to the left, and ooh, we find some skeletons playing games. This must have been a break room. In the middle of the room, we see 4 skeletons, 2 of whom are playing chess. They've got teeny tiny model robots that they're using as chess pieces. Looks like they're making bets. We see bottle caps here. On the other side, we see a skeleton trying to have a conversation with another guy hiding behind a stack of books. To the west, we find, ooh, this person was stabbed through the mouth with a Chinese officer sword. Oh, that's gruesome. On the desk, we see more blocks. We have to go around to the other side to read them. It spells hush. Okay, was this supposed to be a bit of a library? We see a teddy bear on the desk. He's holding a hammer and a stopwatch, wearing a trilby and sunglasses while smoking a cigarette. On the couch, we find a dismembered skeleton. Turning around to the south, we find a book return terminal. However, it doesn't appear to work. There's a bit of a workshop behind this. Going around back, we find a bunch of scrap, some bottle caps on the bottom shelf, and we hear static coming from a radio, but it's not a radio. It's marked surveillance device. Sounds like Vault-Tec was monitoring their overseers in training, even while they were on break. Turning around, we find a coffee table with more of MacCready's wooden soldiers and some blocks. I tried to figure out what this was supposed to say, but it's only 3 letters, and every side is gibberish. BGS, TXU, NMY. I thought maybe the word was on the bottom then. EKP. No, okay. But behind a pallet, we find another skeleton and another shish kebab. I wonder how Abraham Finch's family heirloom got here. The skeleton is wearing some goggles. And then on a couch in the back, we find quite a scene. A skeleton with a derby holding a clipboard. Another skeleton pointing a pipe weapon at him with a yardstick as an arm. And then we've got a giddy-up buttercup with a Brahmin skull for a head. There's a door in the back of this room. Woo! God, Preston, don't do that to me. Looks like this leads to a hallway that goes around in a big loop. Yeah, sure enough, going north we see that it connects to the first hallway we found upon entry. Okay, so we can head back and go north down this next hallway to finish exploring. The first door to the right is another classroom, with each of these desks expertly decorated. The first guy is a tea and coffee aficionado, but ooh, he's got a comic stabbed in the eye with a plunger on his head. The next guy is a smoker, both cigars and cigarettes. Let's see, he spelled something with these cigarettes. What'd he say? Wasted? Oh, maybe he's got another combustible here, something a little stronger. Behind this guy is a lover of flowers and nature. And then behind this guy, we find a skull with half the skull missing and a light bulb sticking out. If this guy had a great idea, it's long since gone. Next to him are two desks, back to back. Their owners were engaged in arm wrestling before the bombs dropped. Either that or the raiders or the crazed students posed them this way afterwards. They were betting, it looks like. We see money in caps everywhere. And on the ground beneath it, we find a master-locked Boyo's lunch. Inside, we find 134 bottle caps. I wonder who won. I hope it was Boyo. Continuing in a big horseshoe of this room, we find a desk with scientific samples on it, including a plate filled with small pieces of brain fungus. Ugh. And here's something cool. We see a scale, on one plate a sword and on the other a pen. The pen may be mightier than the sword, and it also looks like they weigh the same. The teacher's desk is covered in all sorts of scrap metal, and the teacher's bones are all over the place. Come on, get out of there, Preston. His skull is on the chair. He's got wild mute fruit as a nose and scissors stabbed through his skull. God, this is horrifying. Heading out and continuing north down the hallway, we see that it ends at a restroom. Ladies to the left, and gentlemen to the right. Heading into the women's restroom first, we see a big hole in the wall. Oh, that's not good. Creeping into the first stall, we find a construction worker lying in the toilet. There's a big hole behind this guy. It looks like he was trying to repair it. Two stalls down, we find a skeleton with his head in the toilet. Looks like he was crushing his own head with the toilet seat. Or someone made it to look that way. There are two boxes of Mentats beneath some toothpaste and a toothbrush, and then a bottle of Buff Jet. In the final stall, there's nothing. Whoa!
Time to reel him in.
Man, what was that guy's stealth set to? He snuck up on me. And where was Preston? Where is he, Preston? Where are you? Oh, there he is. Going the opposite direction. Brilliant. While heading into the men's restroom, checking out that first stall, we find a skeleton pressed up against the cracks in the wall, spying on the ladies. Well, that's disgusting. We even find a sledgehammer on the ground. I think we know who made this big hole in the wall. Not exactly subtle. And then two over, what is this? We see 7 teddy bears surrounding a toilet. Looks like they've turned it into an altar, and they've put upon the altar their own precious money. Inside we find a stack of pre-war money, and above the toilet is a skeleton splayed out wearing another one of Bosco's mascot heads. Going to the urinals, we find a cooler on the ground, a skeleton with his hands gripping one of the urinals. His head is smashed in pieces inside the urinal, and we find another skull with a derby in the next one. Exactly how many people were killed here? With the northern end explored, we turn around to go south. We bypass the stairway going up. We'll explore up there in a minute. Continuing down, the next door is to the east. This leads to a bit of a kitchen or a larder. There's a skeleton on top of a bottle crate trying to get at some water. Strangely enough, the water in here looks like dirty water, but it's marked purified water. And there's a dryer in here. On top of the dryer is a bamboo basket. Inside the basket is a stack of clothing. I had a hunch that we might find something in here. Looting all of the clothing one by one. Sure enough, look at that. Safe key. Aha! Now we can finally see what's in that safe. The stove has a bunch of saucepans and food cooking, and we see another skeleton shoved into this yellow workshop sink. There's a fridge door lying on the ground, but it works. Looks like this is programmed to continue to work. The other fridge has a bunch of food inside. All right, well, I'm eager to see what's inside that safe. So, retracing our steps back to the very beginning, we can go into the very first room we found, head to the adjacent room, and open the safe. Inside, we find 250 bottle caps. Wait, a copy of Guns and Bullets? Uh-oh. Looks like if we install this mod, we may get more perk magazines than the game intended, which might be a problem for those concerned about overpowering themselves. And then below this, we find a unique railway rifle called Penetrator with 46 railway spikes. It doesn't look like it has a legendary effect, but we'll go ahead and switch to it anyway just to get this adventure's full experience. Moving out, we go back south down the hallway, and now we can go through a crack to the south. Here we see a trail of bottle caps leading into the next room. Ooh, a piece of candy. Ooh, a piece of candy. Ooh, a piece of candy. And we stop at an open shipping crate to the left. We hear the noises of raiders, and peering around the corner,
Good shit. I'll find you.
and then another one. And then another one. Whoa!
This is all mine.
Got him. Inside the shipping crate at the very end, we find a wooden crate, some med-X by a chair, and 3 beautiful nature scenes on the wall here. Maybe this was a raider's happy place. We find railway spikes embedded in the poster on the opposite wall. Since I'm using a railway rifle now, I'm going to go ahead and loot all of these. On top of the wooden crate is a teddy bear holding a gear aloft, and we find a stealth boy hiding behind some buckets. Crouching down, we can head out. Instead of going south, let's go west, peer to the north, then peer to the south. Going down this small nook, we find a shopping cart filled with vegetables. Continuing south, we see 2 fragmentation mines upside down next to a box. And the next to this is another one of those shipping canister happy places. There's a workbench here, but it looks like a barrel. And then in the back of the shipping crate, we find a bunch of produce injected with an assortment of chems. A berserk syringe, some psycho, Calmex, Fury, Overdrive, and antibiotics. Looks like this guy was conducting some sort of experiment. He's weighing a pumpkin and some mute fruit. There looks like some sort of painting of a Norwegian horse on the wall. I don't recall that from the vanilla game. And finally, there's a first aid kit on the wall. Heading out, we can round the corner and turn north to loot the corpses of those raiders we killed a moment ago. Inside the shipping crate, we find another one of Pikmin's paintings. No logical reason why it's here though. And we see another game of chess, this time with wooden soldiers and aliens as the game pieces. From here we can pick up looting that trail of bottle caps. It takes us through a small crack between 2 boxes and around a corner. Ooh, a piece of candy. And it ends at an upside-down stop sign. But we don't see anything else here. Nothing behind the stop sign. Turning around and rounding the corner to the east, we can explore the next shipping crate. Inside we find a bunch of mannequins. And in the very back, we find 2 mannequins in love. There's a bunch of bottle caps in the shape of a heart, next to a basket with a bear and bottles inside. We also find a revolutionary sword in this pile. Above this is a novice-locked mirror. Inside we just find a small stash of goods. That's it for this room, so to continue we can go through one of either 2 doors, one to the southwest and one to the southeast. We'll move to the southeast first. Going through the door and heading down the hallway, we can creep around the corner and... nothing. Okay, this one's empty. It looks like these raiders have collected some impressive gear though. We find 2 crates of mini nukes, an expert-locked ammo box, filled with alien blaster rounds and even more mini nukes. We see a dead Brahmin here. The raiders have balanced beer on its corpse. There's a first aid box on the wall, and then we find a novice-locked industrial trunk. Inside we find a small stash of caps and chems. In the cigarette machine we find a dog whistle. This dog whistle is a vanilla game item that was for some reason cut from the end game. Its only effect is to move dog meat to your location. When I tried to use it, it didn't work because I already had Preston as a companion. It's this item that Nick Valentine uses if you don't have dog meat as a companion after searching Kellogg's house in the main quest. With the southwestern room explored, we can head back out into the big shipping crate room and go through the southeastern doorway. Here we find one more shipping crate with a small typing station in the back, and beneath the clipboard, we find another copy of Robco Fun. And in the toolbox, yet another one of MacCready's wooden toy soldiers. He must have shipped a big box of them here as a kid. Heading through the doorway to the southeast, we round a corner.
Let's do this.
And the railway rifle wins the day. After looting the raiders and dogs, we can head to a dresser that's locked with a master lock. Inside we find a stash of 350 bottle caps and a unique item called Hoarder. This appears to be another junk jet, but it also didn't work. When I tried to load junk into it, it didn't detect any in my inventory. I even looted a bunch of the bottles and stuff here, and it still didn't work. So I'm not sure if this item is glitched or if I'm just using it wrong. Next to this is an advanced locked trash bin. Inside this, we find quite a stash of chems, including one X-Cell. With that, we finish exploring the entire bottom floor. To continue, we wind back down the hallway and climb the stairs to the second floor. Here we see cafeteria to the left and clinic and lavatory to the right. Let's explore the cafeteria first. At the end of this hallway, we see two doors, a closed one to the left and an open one to the right. We'll go ahead and sneak into this closed one first. Here we find some chems and a nuke mine on an end table next to some mentats. And in the middle of the room, we find a bunch of scrap and trash, including a levitating 10mm pistol. In the eastern corner, we find a skeleton lying on top of a big pile of glue. I sifted through this entire pile looking for some keys, but there's nothing here. And no, not even glue can be used as ammunition in the Hoarder. On a nightstand to the north, we find a teddy bear wearing an army helmet, and in the dresser we find the dismembered bones of almost a complete skeleton. When done, we can cross the hall to the cafeteria. And wow, it's a big room. Each of these tables decorated with foodstuffs. We see a skeleton drowned in a big bowl of food. On the ground behind this is a skeleton with a melon as a head, impaled by knives. We find one table with two skeletons grappling over a fork. Looks like they were fighting to see who was going to eat. And then we find some of those happy birthday sweet rolls that we found inside Reeb Marina. Not sure why we find a stack of them here. This treat was specially made by brothers Eugene and Malcolm. It's then we catch the attention of another raider. Oh, but I had the Hoarder equipped. Racing into the next room. Where did he go?
Need some cover!
Ah! It was two of them, but they didn't last long when confronted by the penetrator. Here we find a big stack of overdue books. My goodness, this makes it easy to get that magazine in the Boston Library book return. And then we find a pile of caps, spelling a word by the cash register. Money. Next to this is a teddy bear holding two spoons and wearing a chef hat. The blocks before him say clean to the left and dirty to the right. And indeed, we find a pile of clean plates and utensils to the left and dirty to the right. A skeleton separates the piles with a rolled up newspaper in his mouth. Looks like he's been stabbed through the left arm with a combat knife. Behind the countertop, we find a bunch of scrap and loot, a smaller than usual cooler behind some paint cans with 40 caps inside, and beneath a big stack of napkins is a copy of Le Coiffe. I wonder what happens if you loot this magazine upon having already discovered this magazine. Do you get 2 copies of The Hornet's Nest in the barber menu? We can loot a duffel bag behind the counter filled with caps and loot, some blood packs next to another skeleton as we move forward, and 2 Nuka grenades, a pretty rare explosive. In this back room, we see 2 end-of-dungeon steamer trunks to the northwest, one of which is locked with an advanced lock. Both of them contain randomized loot. And ooh, I walked right past this. We see the word leave spelled out in human bones. There's a first aid kit on the wall next to the door. Another skeleton is shoved into this refrigerator. And then we see the body of a dolphin shark on a table. Goodness, these raiders must have been hungry. we find the chef smothered to death with a pillow over his face in the southern corner to the south. And then we can loot some berry mentats in a basket and, strangely enough, some X-111 compound, which was made by the Brotherhood of Steel aboard the Pridwin. Not sure how it could have gotten here. On a shelf, we find a booty key. I searched all over looking for a container that is opened with this booty key, but I never found one. I'm assuming that it likely opens one of the containers we already picked. Beneath a bucket, we find some flares and cryogenic grenades and a Nuka-Cola Quantum on a produce shelf. That's it for this wing. So heading back to the hallway and turning north, we see a bunch of plungers on the wall spelling the word fun. This is right next to another bathroom. In the first stall, we see a skeleton with a plunger for a head. And the next one, we see a skeleton with a plunger on the head.
Oh, hell no!
Goodness, fella, don't know why you had to get so upset. And the one next to this, we find a skeleton with another plunger for a head, and the toilet is filled with Nuka-Cola. And in the next one, we find a skeleton with plungers for limbs and a Brahmin skull for a head. And in the final one, we see a big puddle of blood next to a skeleton with a plunger for well, he's got a plunger and a fancy hat. And there's one more, a toilet with just a skull with a plunger on top and a jar of Day Tripper on the seat behind it. Heading out and turning right, we find another hallway with 3 rooms. Turning into the right room, we find the billiard room. Look at all of the skeletons just lounging about. There's a skeleton sampling his homegrown produce. 2 lovers with their limbs entwined, but one of which is holding a table knife. There's a Grognak costume in a nearby suitcase. Looks like someone smuggled this from Hubris Comics. And a Silver Shroud silver submachine gun prop in a nearby duffel bag, next to a skeleton holding another robot model. On one of the billiard tables, we find more of these rare commemorative baseball paraphernalia next to more bottle caps, a strange stack of MacReady's dolls. We can't interact with this, so we can't tip it down. There's another pirate skeleton here with Hancock's hat, a machete in his mouth, guarding a crate. The crate is locked with an advanced lock, and inside we find a unique weapon called Hephaestus. This is a flare gun. Does not appear to have any other special function aside from shooting flares. There's a skeleton on the ground with a baseball and a baseball mitt stabbed in the eye with a combat knife, some baseball cards stacked up in a pyramid on a nearby shelf, and then 2 fun-loving guys over here wearing hats with a big crate of booze and smoking a stogie. Another guy sits here with wine and Nuka-Cola in his hands. He has a pumpkin head with treats and goodies inside. And then another skeleton has made a pillow fort for himself. Inside the pillow fort is a sharp pool cue mod. And we see that these are nearly 2 full skeletons, splayed out on the table with their heads almost touching. The pool balls next to a bottle cap mine spell the word USA. Heading to the end of the hallway, we see 2 rooms. One is locked with a master lock, and heading in here first, we find a doctor's office with a little waiting room out here. There's a construction worker in one, a baseball kid in another, and a guy reading a newspaper without a head in the next. On a bed, we find a guy with a surgical scalpel stabbed into his eye, a meat bag in one of these institute sinks, and we find a locked safe. We can't unlock it with the booty key we found, and even after turning this place upside down, I never found the appropriate key. But inside, we find a unique weapon called Short Dr. Nettles' Little Helper Rifle. This appears to be a named syringe rifle with no legendary effect and no other added bonuses, but it does work. We can open it and insert syringes. On the ground, we see a skeleton and his skull has been smashed with a fire extinguisher. Oh. And then the doctor in charge here must be sitting in a chair by the desk. We see his body surrounded by pre-war money, and he's been stabbed by some sort of injector. I wonder if this is a subtle message from the mod author about the state of Big Pharma. Heading out and turning left, we find the final room. And it looks like another lounge room. We see a TV area. There's a copy of Total Hack magazine beneath a big stew pot on top of a skull on a couch, and the skeleton is being hugged by a teddy bear. There's some food on a coffee table, 2 more skeletons on a couch. Looks like one of these guys was in the middle of some sort of physical inspection. Not sure why that wasn't done in the medical office. To the west, there's another skeleton with a bunch of empty IV bags beneath him. In the middle of the room, we see two tables. One has a skeleton looking into a microscope, and the other has a skeleton holding a bowling ball aloft above his head. There are 3 lockers filled with food and meat for some reason. And then the second table has a big pile of money next to bottles that spell the word, oh, so edgy, you mad lad. On a shelf to the northeast, we find some Mentats food, caps and bobby pins, as well as jet. And with that, we finish exploring the Calvin Coolidge Institute. These pre-war Vault-Tec overseers clearly went mad after the bombs dropped, and when the raiders arrived, they just made things even more peculiar. What are your thoughts on this player-made dungeon mod? I've done a few of these videos in the past. People enjoy exploring player-made dungeons, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you want to explore more player-made dungeons like this? This one is available on the PS4, Xbox One, and for PCs, so you should all be able to enjoy it. Maybe you guys can find the container that I missed for that booty key, and find the key that I couldn't find for that final container. Thanks for watching all. I publish a new Fallout video 6 days a week, but I take Sundays off, which means I'm not gonna have a video for you tomorrow. But never fear, I'll be back with a brand new video for you Tuesday morning. I have a new shirt in the shop, folks. Rebel Ramp. The nuclear bombs of 2077 devastated major cities, but this devastation conveniently stacked this rubble in ways that allow us to access great heights and hidden stores of goods. Celebrate this fact with my Rebel Ramp shirt. It also comes as a poster, and I think the poster is particularly attractive. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you Tuesday morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.